Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Melanie Zona in Washington, where the Trump administration scored a pair of legal victories in its efforts to enact hardline immigration policies. The Supreme Court allowing the White House to remove legal protections from tens of thousands of immigrants from Haiti and Syria. In a separate decision, the court also making it easier for the Trump administration to deny asylum seekers entry at the U.S.-Mexico border. The court voted 6-3 along ideological lines in both cases. The decision allowing the Trump administration to revoke the legal status of Haitian and Syrian immigrants who had been granted temporary protected status, also known as TPS, which means roughly 350,000 Haitians and 6,000 Syrians could be deported. White House border czar Tom Homan touting today's decision.
The right call. You know, I've been doing this since 1984. TPS has never been temporary. The problem is no administration have had the guts to actually follow that statute. President Trump has the guts to follow the law. So temporary means temporary. When the condition of that country gets better, they need to go home.
Now, it's worth noting here that both Haiti and Syria are on the State Department's do not travel list for Americans, with the State Department warning Americans, quote, do not travel to Haiti due to kidnapping, crime, terrorist activity, civil unrest, and limited health care. And separately warning, quote, no part of Syria is safe from violence. Today's ruling paves the way for President Trump to continue the aggressive immigration enforcement that was one of his key 2024 campaign promises and included Mr. Trump spreading lies about Springfield, Ohio's Haitian community in the months before the election.
How about in Springfield, Ohio? They had 32,000. This is a little beautiful town. No crime, no problem. 32,000 illegal immigrants come into the town, 32. So they almost doubled their population in a period of a few weeks. Can you believe it? And you know what? They've got to get much tougher. What the hell is wrong with our country? No. We're getting them out of our country. They came in illegally. They're destroying our country. We're getting them out. They're going to be brought back to the country from which they came. I will protect our country.
Today's TPS decision, along with the ruling that a person cannot claim asylum if they present themselves to U.S. officials while standing on the Mexico side of the border, represents clear wins for the White House and its immigration crackdown. And they come as we are still waiting to see how the Supreme Court will rule on one of the Trump administration's most provocative policies, the effort to limit birthright citizenship. Joining me now is NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett and NBC News senior Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining us to break this all down. Laura, I do want to start with you, though. So walk us through what the court decided today, particularly when it comes to TPS protections for Haitian and Syrian immigrants.
Yeah, so, Melanie, these are protections that have been in place since 1990, and Congress basically set it up as a system of humanitarian aid for people who are fleeing war-torn places or natural disasters, like in the situation of Haiti and the earthquake there. People come over, they're allowed to work, they're allowed to live with legal protections, not worrying about having to worry about being deported, until the Trump administration started to roll back those protections, canceling TPS for a variety of different countries, not just Haiti and Syria as we have here. And so today the court saying essentially when the Department of Homeland Security makes those designations about which one's off, which one's on, that is unreviewable by a federal court. And it's because the actual statute says there is no judicial review of any determination of the Secretary of Homeland Security with respect to that designation or termination. So they're pointing to that part of the law saying, look, we're not going to get into this once the Secretary makes those kind of determinations. But the court actually took it a step further and said not just that, but if we look at the statements that the president and the DHS secretary has made about Haitian immigrants in particular, we think there are non-racial reasons for them being against TPS in those cases. And so therefore, it doesn't violate the Constitution. There wasn't some sort of racial discriminatory purpose that the court found, Melanie.
So could today's decision be applied to other immigrants, especially in the future, or does it only apply to immigrants from Haiti and Syria?
It applies to any TPS decision that the DHS secretary decides to invoke or withdraw. As Julia has been doing reporting today, you can see the other countries that have been designated, in some cases canceled. Those people obviously also trying to sue, saying that those designations had been arbitrarily withdrawn. But today it makes it very clear to the lower courts they are not supposed to intervene when the secretary makes that type of designation and cancels TPS for immigrants in those specific countries. Melanie.
Laura, explain this other decision today about asylum seekers.
Yeah, so this all has to do with where are you physically located. If you're trying to cross the U.S.-Mexico border, are you on the Mexico side or are you on the U.S. side? For those who cross over to the United States, you can still claim asylum if you meet certain very restrictive circumstances. For those who are still remaining on foreign soil, the Supreme Court today is saying if you are on foreign soil, you are not here for the purposes of invoking those immigration protections, and therefore the Trump administration can turn you away. I think you should see both of these rulings in sort of the larger rubric of the Trump administration really trying to crack down in every possible locale on where they can and people coming over, and really just now adding to another sort of feather in their hat, if you will, in their effort to turn people away.
And I mentioned that we're still awaiting the Supreme Court's decision on the Trump administration's effort to limit birthright citizenship. So do today's decisions give any hints about how the court might rule in that case?
Those are such, these are such distinctive issues, and I know people want to look for trends. They want to read the tea leaves. I think it is perfectly possible and plausible that in these particular cases, the high court, the conservative majority, could hand the Trump administration a win, and then we could see something very different when it comes to birthright citizenship. Of course, that's his effort, using an executive order to try to upend and roll back protections that have been enshrined in the 14th Amendment to our Constitution, giving people the right to have citizenship if they are born here, even if their parents are undocumented immigrants. The Trump administration wants to upend that, but the justices, Melanie, very skeptical about that plan. An oral argument doesn't necessarily mean that they won't agree with him, but we'll see what they do. Decisions coming more on Monday.
And I know you'll be watching that very closely for us, Laura. Jarrett, thank you so much. Sure. I want to turn now to Julia Ainsley, who's on set with me here. Just break down for me what is going to happen for Haitian and Syrian immigrants who are currently already living in this country right now under this protected status.
Well, this now gives the executive branch its authority, really pulling the power away from the courts to say that they can now end not only their work authorization, but the protection that they had to stay in the United States. This was a fear under other administrations that they could pull some of these things back because it is so squarely fit within the executive branch. But Congress had even taken some action, although it didn't pass through both houses, to try to protect especially people from Haiti, given the unrest, the political unrest in that country, and of course in Syria as well. What this means is that those people could be arrested and deported as soon as today, as soon as tomorrow. They no longer have the protections. Temporary protected status is always extended a little bit by little bit, but that had really been extended, especially for Haiti, since 2010 with the earthquake there, and then when the civil war broke out in Syria since 2015. So in many cases, these are people who have been part of their communities, living, working, raising their children here for more than a decade.
Yeah, that was a point that actually Republican Mike Lawler made. What about asylum? Can they still appeal for asylum?
That can be difficult depending on how long you've been in the country. In order to apply for defensive asylum, which protects you from deportation, that is usually done within the first year of coming to the United States. And so while they had TPS, they could have applied for asylum to try to have a more, that would be affirmative asylum that would give them a longer period of time to be able to stay here and perhaps put them on a pathway to citizenship. But if they haven't applied already, it's really hard to see how that window could be open to this specific population.
And just big picture here, how does this all really fit into the administration's broader enforcement agenda?
Well, we've seen time and time again this administration try to show the power of the executive branch when it comes to immigration. And as Congress has failed to act over so many years, as you know, to pass any kind of comprehensive immigration reform, each administration pushes that power, some to make things easier for immigrants, some to make things harder for immigrants. And so this really fits into the power. These were critical wins today about what the White House and DHS by extension can do when it comes to immigrants, and that they do not have to give a reason for why these people are now ending TPS. It's not up to a judge to say it's not safe there anymore. They can just dismiss that designation without explanation.
Switching gears just a little bit here, the Department of Homeland Security's Inspector General announced 2 new investigations into ICE's handling of detained immigrants. What is the focus of those investigations?
Yeah, it's interesting. There are 2 new investigations. One is to deaths inside ICE custody. We've written about that here, a rise in deaths and suicides in ICE custody. They're also looking into use of force, that being by people who are responsible for securing and detaining those immigrants. There's been a lot of calls across the country, even some very public protests about conditions inside. The IG says now they want to look at these 2 specific issues. But Homeland Security Secretary Mark McMillan was asked about the deaths in ICE custody today, and he really pushed back on there being a rise in the rate. Take a listen to what he said.
Does DHS have any official, specific internal goals or policies to reduce deaths in custody?
Ma'am, your numbers just aren't accurate. We've had 0.009%.
Mr. Secretary,
you're asking about this. It's 0.009% of deaths. And we've had 54 total in the president's time. Those are dangerous accusations you're making.
Mr. Secretary.
Those are dangerous accusations that she's making. Because in the state of Illinois, they're twice as high to die in the state penitentiary of Illinois than they are in detention.
You are invited to this committee. This is my time.
And you need to be informed by what you're saying.
Just to add a fact check on that, we did speak to an epidemiologist who's looked through the death rates, and he says that it has increased. It's not just a matter of having more people in detention. There has been an increase in the death rate inside ICE detention.
And Julia, you also have some new reporting on that now former CIA officer who was found with more than $40 million of gold bars. But now apparently investigators say he may have received additional money that they're looking for. Tell us about that.
Yeah, this is a story my colleagues and I have continued to cover because it feels like it's the next movie, out of Hollywood when you hear about some of these details. This is David Rush. He was a longtime CIA officer. He was found with $40 million in gold bars in his home. And now we understand the investigators are looking for much more in either money or in other goods like Rolexes that have been sent around the world, perhaps. He requested these and now they're unaccounted for. Are they in another property he may have? Have they been sent somewhere to another country? That's all up in the air. The other thing that we've learned that we should now note about this case is that David Rush allegedly had an affair with a woman who became his supervisor, the CIA. Of course, raising questions about could this activity that he engaged in have gone unchecked because of the relationship he had with his supervisor. So we will continue to keep you updated with every twist and turn of this wild story.
Please do. A crazy story that just keeps getting crazier. Julia Ainsley, thank you.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.